All right, I'm gonna have you guys jump in here, 401, and I'm gonna keep sending out notifications just to remind everybody in the meantime, but I'll let you kick it off with some introductions as you guys normally do, from Caroline and Tristan. I see Nick's on as well as a panelist, so Nick can feel free to reintroduce himself as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm Caroline. I am one of our account executives here at Metron. I primarily sell to and work with our mobile home park owners as well as commercial and multifamily. So freezing is something I'm definitely familiar with, but Tristan, who's been with Metron for 5 years and in field service, is more familiar. He has been installing meters for a very, very long time in many states and now oversees all of field service. So this is definitely his wheelhouse. And so he'll be, talking about this. And then we've got Nick here as well. Nick, do you want to jump in and say anything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Nick Bettis, I lead the marketing group here. I'm going to leave most of the talking to our the people that are far more intelligent on this call than I am. So, but I'll be in the background if you've got any questions. Happy to answer them. Kristen?
Awesome.
All
Awesome.
right. Like Carolyn said, I've been in the business for 5 years now. I actually started as one of our two field techs back in the day. So now we have a much larger team that spans across the country. And I am our field service program manager. So I oversee all of the service operations as well as the personnel management. So I've installed meters in over 27 states in my time as a field tech. That includes a lot of cold weather states, negative temperatures in Minnesota, Ohio, all across the place. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk about freezing today. It's a hot topic, especially right now with all the snowstorms happening. We really want to highlight what you can do to prevent freezing when it comes to submetering. Obviously, in the mobile home park world, a lot of the water lines are exposed underneath the home. So this is definitely something that occurs. But we see, a lot of ways that you can prevent this. So we'll highlight on the hardware side, our hardware specifically, as well as what you can do to set up a pad for success through the winter and, the time you're owning it. Freezes happen, but there are definitely a bunch of things to prevent that. So go ahead, Tristan. Let's start with the hardware.
Sure. Yeah, so as far as Metron's own products, from a hardware side, all of our standard residential meters are a composite material and are equipped with freeze plates. And I'll get to demonstrating the freeze plate in a little bit. But because they're composite, they actually can expand a little bit more than brass. And then coupled with the freeze plate, everybody knows when water gets cold, it starts expanding. The freeze plate allows it to expand kind of naturally with the water as it's freezing. And that in addition, they're also very low volume meters. So just compared to the rest of the industry, our meters have a much lower internal volume as the rest of our competitors. So they don't hold as much water. So there's less water, there's less to freeze. They've also got, and I'll actually go ahead and pull it up here. This is one of our standard S30D water meters, and it's equipped with our VN register on top. So the VN registers, kind of the brains of our unit here, is fully encased in urethane. So they're actually fully water resistant, freeze resistant. If your meter buddy goes out for any reason, say you have a freeze, the brains of the register or the brains of the meter are still fully salvageable, and you can use them on a new meter. And then the last feature I want to touch on for the hardware is the temperature sensors. So all of our meters are equipped with temperature sensors. The ones like I showed here with the VN registers, those are going to be an ambient temperature sensor. So they can tell the temperature kind of around the environment of the meter. As well as our spectrum wave ultrasonic meters, which is a new product for us. Those have a water temperature sensor, so that can actually measure the water temperature in the pipe. So, and then we'll get moving on to the software side. So our WaterScope platform takes those temperature readings from the sensors and any of our meters, and it does like a daily reading of your minimum and maximum as it's recording all of the temperatures throughout the day. And you can actually set up freeze alerts they're either set as an email notification or Carolyn, you might help me with this. I think there's another type of notification you can set.
I went ahead and shared my screen. I have water scope pulled up on the software side. So what I've hovered over is our low temperature alert.
Caroline, just real quick, I'm not sure we can see your screen. At least I can't. Is anyone else
Thank
seeing
you.
the same?
not yet.
Okay, no worries. I just want to make sure.
Okay, let's see if we can see it now. How's this? Is this better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm hovering over here, this is going to be that low temperature alert. As a threshold, we have it set to alert at 36 degrees and lower. Now, this is something you can tailor based on, your experience with the park. On the spectrometer, the one that Tristan held up, that's going to take the ambient temperature right outside the meter. We also have an ultrasonic, and that takes the temperature of the water itself. So they will alert at that 36-degree mark. I recommend keeping it there. You have a better handle on the park and you know what is gearing up to freeze rather than, oh, it's starting to freeze now. You can also go over into the settings and then you can tailor these low temperatures and edit what temperature you would like it to alert at. Say you want it to go at 32 degrees or 30, whatever you want. So like Tristan said, we'll take that minimum temperature. That's really important in wintertime that you get an email that is occurring at every pad, especially if you're a property manager and your boots on the ground, you're there and you can notify the homeowner.
So then last point on the software side of it, I like to always recommend that if you see one of those low temperature flags and you also see it coupled with a 0 use flag, that's a good indicator that you might want to visit that pad. If it's got a low temperature alert, especially if it shows you it's below 32 degrees and it also shows 0 usage, it can be an indicator of a freeze. It doesn't necessarily mean that the meter has frozen, but that's a good time to go ahead and check that pad just to make sure. So you can look out for those alerts coupled together. And then moving on to our next topic, we're just going to go over some general do's and don'ts for cold weather protection, prevention, and just dealing with freezes. So I like to say that heat tape coupled with insulation is always your first line of defense. If you're in a cold weather state, or honestly, even above, like if you're in Tennessee and above, and it can even be important for some states, just depending on the weather that year, to always have heat tape and insulation. I think most people will understand what heat tape is, but I did bring an example. So this is just one of the typical types of heat tape you'll see. It's just a braided cable with a yellow wire on the inside, and you can get as much or as little length of that as you need. And they'll normally have as well a plug with an end you can plug into a standard outlet. Most manufacturers do recommend that that's a ground fault outlet. I'll put that over there for now. And then as well as the insulation. You do always want to have insulation when you have heat tape. I would say it's probably like 20% as effective if you only have heat tape itself. You're losing all of that heat directly to the atmosphere. There's nothing holding it in. So you want to have insulation always coupled with your heat tape. Just based on a standard manufacturer, down to about 0 degrees, you want to lightly kind of snake the heat tape around the pipe. That's kind of like a 1 to 3 ratio, or sorry, 1 to 1.3 ratio. And then as your like minimum temperatures you see in your area start decreasing, you want to start adding more revolutions of the heat tape around the pipe. And I actually have a handy graphic I wanted to pull up as well. So let me see if I can share my screen here. So is everybody able to see that?
Yes, sir.
So this is part of a freeze prevention guide that we will be releasing soon. But you can see this graphic right here of just the kind of how to space the heat tape on your water line there as you're wrapping it around. So down to 0 degrees, it can be widely spaced. Down to -20, you want to kind of increase those revolutions, and down to -60, which is the like extreme maximum of the temperature, that the heat tape's rated for, you want to tightly space those wraps. So, and we will, this document's kind of pending right now, but it will be released very soon for the general public.
One thing I want to jump in and say is it's really important, especially if you have a property in a cold weather state, to note in the lease, is it the tenant responsibility and up to what point? So is it up to the meter that they are taking care of the lines? Is it your responsibility? And then in that case, if it is tenant responsibility, really making sure every fall you send out a how-to guide or a what to look out for. And then at that point, it really is tenant responsibility to make sure heat tape is up to date, insulation is wrapped around the whole pipe, so on and so forth. But if this is your responsibility, we recommend doing checks once a year in the fall so you are well prepared to make it through the winter.
There's a question here from Dean Kessler about what type of insulation you guys recommend.
That was actually our next section, so we can go ahead and get into that. That's a great transition.
Perfect.
The most commonly used is a lot of people refer to it as the pool noodle insulation. It's that closed cell foam insulation tubes that they're normally black and it's like a foamy material, basically like a pool noodle. But it is specially made for insulating water pipes. So there's that. Normally you'll use like a standard 1 inch of the foam insulation. That normally covers your 1/2 inch up to 1 inch pipes. If the weather is a lot colder, then you can use the 1.5 inch thick, more rubberized foam insulation. That's more for extreme temperatures. But we do very much recommend you use like branded insulation that's made for water lines. Just with my own time in the field, I have seen very commonly people use drywall insulation. They use like a fiberglass wrapping you can buy, say at a hardware store, to kind of wrap around the meter or the water line. Those things can work. They're not super great in extreme temperatures, but it can work for like more moderate climates. The problem is once you've introduced like water or any kind of moisture into that environment, those materials start breaking down very rapidly. And once it's soaked in water, if they're damp for a long enough time, especially if your water line's not elevated, if it's sitting on the ground, it's exposed to rainwater, snow melt, any kind of thing like that. Those materials start not necessarily decomposing, but they clump together and it loses all effectiveness as an insulator. So we definitely recommend against that. Best thing to use is pipe-specific foam insulation.
So if you've got a park in, say, Ohio or Minnesota, it's really important that you candy cane the heat tape around and use that 1.5 inch thick rubber. That's really where you don't cheap out. The lines, they will freeze quite frequently, especially in a pretty severe cold climate like that.
One thing to note as well while we're talking about the heat tape and insulation is the water line choice. So not everybody has a choice in the matter, say that their property has had the water lines they have since it was built. It'd be probably an extreme expense to replace all of them. But if you're going to replace one, say you need to replumb one of your pads or the line breaks for some reason and it has to be replumbed, we do recommend using PEX piping. For one, it's a lot less corrosive than other pipes, and it also does have some expansion properties to it. So in colder weather, it can expand a little bit more, which helps prevent against freezing.
I think I just have a clarifying question in terms of I guess like we're talking a lot about the pipes leading up to the meter, right? And so I think that's probably something that we should emphasize is that as the water's freezing towards the meter, that's going to cause the meter freeze itself, right? So we're kind of stating the obvious here, but insulating the entire length of the pipe to the meter is extremely important because now you're not going to have freezing water start to aggregate through that pipe because if anyone has had a frozen sewer line, like that drip starts to hit a frozen piece and then it just expands, right? So having the entire exposed portion of that line insulated is extremely important to prevent the meter itself from freezing. Is that correct? Am I stating that correctly?
That would be correct. Yep.
Okay. And so the meter freeze is it has a direct relationship with if the line's frozen before it.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say 9 times out of 10, when I see a picture of, what has caused a meter to freeze, I am looking around the meter rather than at the meter itself to see what the insulation looks like. Is heat tape plugged in first and foremost? Is there heat tape present? You'd be surprised that most of the time there's a lack of heat tape and insulation around it, and that is going to likely cause the issue. The meter itself, and Tristan can go into this, is designed to crack instead of your lines. That's a preventative measure to protect the whole, line from breaking. But these things happen quite often if you don't take care of the lines.
Renee said, do or will you have a diagram similar to the heat tape one?
Yes, we have a PDF we've made. It's a whole in-depth freezing guide, and we're happy to send it to all attendees or have you guys post it on the MHP Pros website, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, all of the resources that are shared today by Caroline, Tristan, and Nick will be present on our community and links within the podcast as well if you guys are listening to this later. So just look either inside our course material specifically for Metron or within our operating course, and all of those resources will be listed for you, or just below the podcast in the podcast description. You should be able to find all of those resources. All right, guys, floor is yours. I don't know if there's a next step here, or you're open to the floor to questions.
So I got a couple more things to get into here. The next consideration we want to talk about will be the skirting. So, of course, the skirting is the surround for the whole underside of the home. I've been to a few properties where that's not present. Maybe the home's sitting on the ground or close to the ground. But almost all mobile home parks, you're going to have skirting surrounding each of your pads. So it's very important to make sure that your skirting is undamaged and it covers the whole perimeter of your house, because the skirting is a protectant first and foremost. So it keeps out snowdrift, it keeps out high winds, and it keeps that heat that's coming from the rest of your home. It actually traps it under the house as well. So it's actually a very good insulator for the rest of your home and for the water line. So always checking skirting come fall, making sure that any gaps are covered. If you have spare panels, which is a great idea to have a couple extra laying around, you can go and shore those up. Or if it's tenant-owned homes, you can always let your residents know, hey, it's fall time, make sure to check your skirting for any damage and get that cleaned up. So moving on, we have one last section before we get into kind of our proactive and reactive measures piece. And that's going to be just some final general recommendations. Fixing leaks. That's a big one. If you have a leak and it's wintertime, it starts getting really cold out, that leak is going to sit in a puddle under your home. It might freeze. It might freeze like sitting right next to the water line, and that can cause the ambient temperature to drop and cause meter freezing. So if the leak is on the line side and not the home side, it's best to obviously have maintenance technicians address those. And of course, let your residents know to regularly check for leaks if they need to and get those addressed as soon as possible. We mentioned using PEX lines in cold climates. That's a big recommendation we have as well. If you have external water lines, so there are some states, and our home state, Colorado, is one of them, where a lot of our mobile home parks actually have externally fed homes. So the water line comes out of the ground and then it comes into the home from the exterior instead of under the pad. So if you have external lines, you can create insulation boxes. Typically, we see these are made with plywood and just a 2x4 structure. They can be pretty simple, but it's a very effective way to keep your external water lines nice and warm. So if you just tuck those with, and this is actually a case where you can use the normal fiberglass insulation to line the inside of the box, and then just set that over your water line. Meter pits, of course, you want to have all of your meters installed below the freeze line if you have meters in meter pits. There's not much else you can do except We have seen before you can kind of stuff insulation into the pit itself to surround the meter. But again, you do have to be careful with that because any kind of fiberglass or like non-closed cell foam insulation can get wet. And once it gets wet, it's often more of a harm than it is good. Another recommendation we do have is to have shutoffs on both sides of the water line. This is not necessary by any means, but it does make servicing the water line and servicing the meter itself a lot easier. So if means allow, having a shutoff on both sides of the meter is a good practice. And as Caroline has mentioned, checking your lease to make sure the responsibility of the tenant and the property, who's responsible for maintaining the heat tape, how much section of the water line, and just making sure that the residents are aware of that as well. So, and then going into a couple do nots. So there are a few things we definitely recommend against. When wrapping the heat tape, it is important that you don't overwrap it. So like we showed a little bit earlier, you want to kind of gently snake it around the line, but you don't want to cross over the heat tape with itself too much. It is made to be able to withstand that, but if you start wrapping it way too much around the meter, I can actually show what it should look like on the meter, but it can create hot spots in the heat tape and it can be a fire hazard. So we definitely recommend against that. So when you have your meter here, I'll show this. If you just gently wrap it just like that, you only need about 2 revolutions around the meter to make it secure. So as long as this is wrapped about like that and it's in insulation, this will be properly protected. I have seen before when I was under some homes, about 15 feet of heat tape wrapped around a meter, stuffed inside of a meter jacket, and that sucker was almost gone. It was melted to heck, and I'm surprised that person's house didn't catch on fire. So do not overwrap the heat tape. It can actually be very dangerous. And it's not as effective if your heat tape shorts out because you overwrapped it. And then as well, just a final note on that do not section. It is best practice to not leave any like active water lines in vacant homes. So kind of when you're doing your fall check for all of your pads, knowing where your vacant homes are and making sure those water lines are off, and if possible, flushing the water lines is always a great practice because if there's no water, then there's nothing to freeze. So, and then getting into our last section, we have a couple of proactive and reactive measures you can do just to help prevent freezes at your property and address them if you do get them. So one of the biggest things we do recommend is, and I've mentioned a couple times, doing a fall audit. So especially if you live in a colder state, you can maybe do this in September or October, just depending on your weather patterns. You can determine the best time to go through this. But a fall audit, that's a great time to, for one, just audit your meter system in general, check if any meters have been replaced, you have accurate serial numbers recorded, check that you have working heat tape. It's important to check both the plug that plugs into the outlet under the home and the heat tape line itself. Make sure there's no, especially burn spots or fraying of the wire or any cut portions of the tape. And just do a simple operation check to make sure the heat tape box has not been flooded, maybe by groundwater, and that it's still operable. Of course, you also want to check that your insulation is firmly wrapped around all sections of the line. You want to check for your skirting, make sure there's no gaps and shore those up. And then a couple extra considerations you can do for that is ordering extra meter bodies in the fall time. So along with your fall audit, we recommend that most properties order a couple extra, maybe 5 extra meter bodies to have on hand, because we all know that freezes do happen. We can't have eyes everywhere, unfortunately. So there might be something we miss. We might have a freeze, and it might be early in the morning, and you don't want to call Metron and wait for a meter to get there. You want to have one right there so your maintenance technician can go service that meter.
I have a quick question for you guys on that specific topic.
Sure.
Let's say you have a 100 site park. Are you guys recommending 5 meters on hand, or do you guys have sort of a scale for however many, pads you have to maybe have those many spare meters available just in case you have a really cold night and you have not done these things that you're mentioning. So the
Yep.
freezes are inevitably going to happen. What is your recommendation to kind of have stuff on hand? And let's say you have done everything correctly, even like your minimum, requirement, let's say per 100 lots.
Sure. So what we recommend typically is having 5 meters per 100 lots that you have on site. So if you have 300 total pads, you want to make sure that you have 15 extra meter bodies, just in case you get a cold weather event. God forbid that you have 15 meters freeze in the middle of the night, but if you did, there you go, you have your meters to cover them. So that's what we would recommend is 5 meters per 100 lots.
Perfect.
So, and then as well as some other things we touched on, we recommend setting up freeze alerts and water scope. Those are standard at 36 degrees. So once the meter senses temperatures at 36 degrees or below, it'll have that temperature alert. You can set that lower, but we don't recommend you set it lower, honestly. It's good to have it at 36. Instructing your tenants to drip water lines when the cold weather comes is another great preventative measure. Not everybody thinks about it, and everybody's lives are busy. Sometimes the weather is the last thing on our mind. So sending out a notification that, hey, we're going to have cold weather tonight or for the next couple of days, everybody should be making sure to drip their water lines either throughout the day if it's very cold or at night, just for those nightly temperatures. And then, of course, you want to, in your fall audit, check your heat tape and make sure that it's been serviced regularly. And remember that the heat tape does have a lifespan. So typically that would be 3 to 5 years is a standard manufacturer's recommendation. A lot of times and myself, I've seen in the field that there's been heat tape sitting there for 30 years and it probably hasn't been working for 25 of those. So always making sure to check the lifespan on the heat tape yearly and if needed, replace that. And then getting into our reactive measures. So like we said, if you do have a freeze or when you have a freeze, what you can do to address that immediately. So the first thing to check if you have a frozen meter is if the freeze plate has expanded or cracked. You may have water flowing out of the meter if it has cracked. So that's a pretty telltale indicator. But otherwise, and once I do our demo here in just a second, I'll show you. You can kind of look inside the meter and you can see the freeze plate expanding. So that's one first thing to check for. And then as well as checking water scope for those temperature and then zero use updates. So once you have a freeze, you've identified that there's a problem. You first want to shut off the water to the home, of course. You're going to want to replace your water meter and I forgot one thing. I forgot to bring my meter fittings. But if you can imagine, there's normally 1 thread and 2 threads. There's meter fittings on here. So you can just unthread those. You would take your meter out and you can put your meter back in. But before you do that, you want to make sure that there's no ice in your water line as well. Because if you do, you might not want to put another water meter on it just yet. You might want to unthaw your water lines first. So you can reinstall your meter and then always making sure after a freeze to check your heat tape and insulation and make sure that you properly rewrap it. And actually I wanted to show as well, I brought my handy drill. So as I mentioned in the hardware section, the register portion of our meters is perfectly safe during a freeze event. So when you remove your meter, don't chuck it in the trash just yet. It's not bad. So you can actually take these registers off and you can put it on your new meter body. So what that'll prevent is needing to send updates to Metron or keeping track of multiple different serial numbers across the same pad if you have freezes. That way, the same register can stay with the same pad. You only have to change out the meter body. So, and in order to do that, you can see on our on the two sides there, we've got two T25 security screws. So if you have a T25 security bit, that's just going to come off. Just like that, and the register will pop out with the outer housing, and then you have the lower housing in the meter body. So this portion just holds it on. So this you can keep this as well. You don't have to toss this with the meter body. And then you can put your new register on there. And then I wanted to show as well what the freeze plate on our meters looks like. So you can see that section with the 6 screws going around the circumference there. That's the freeze plate. So what you'll commonly see if a meter has frozen is that this plate on the inside has been raised up, or it's bulged a little bit. And that's that section it's actually been designed to do that. So that way, when your meter does freeze, or if the meter freezes, it does have a little bit of give to it as well. You do want to replace it at that point. If the frost plate has expanded, it's good to go ahead and replace it. But that's to give it an extra line of defense against cracks and leaking after a freeze.
I love that. It's as easy as this demonstration. That was very nice. Well done, Tristan.
Tristan, will you show them a little bit about the meter jacket that we provide and how that goes around a meter as well?
Of course. We've got a couple different types of meter jackets. This is one of our models here. You can see you've got 2 entrances for the pipe, and they are actually fitted to a 3/4 inch pipe, so they can secure all the way around it, as well as Velcro straps. I've only got one on right now, just for demonstration. These Velcro straps hold both sides of the meter jacket together. And you just wrap it around like so. It's pretty easy to even do with one hand. So we're going to take this apart. I'll show you kind of how the meter sits in it. I grab one of my other meters here. Oh, there's my meter couplings. That's where they went. So, and this is one of our Altair 20 meters. So you can see the meter fits just like that. So it's a near perfect fit with just enough room to fit your heat tape wrap around the meter in it. So that's how you would secure it on one side. And then the other side goes on like so to create a nice insulating box around the meter. So that keeps all of that heat tape heat into protect the meter. And actually, now that I mentioned that, it's important to note that these insulation boxes don't do much if you don't have heat tape in them. It's kind of the same with the foam insulation as well. You need a source of heat in order to keep the heat in. So you want to make sure you have your insulation and you have your heat tape and you have your meter jacket. So that's your total freeze prevention system right there.
And those fittings at the end, you could literally just take the end of the PEX and pop them right on. Is that correct? It's kind of like it operates like a shark bite.
Yep, that's correct. So they're male PEX end meter couplings. So those are the standard meter couplings that we sell. Those can be ordered directly from us, which is nice. There's also the kind of industry like standard threaded couplings that you can use. Those can, I think they're normally 3/4 MIP fittings, but we do sell both.
Great.
And that is all I have for my notes. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'll start here and then we can open it up to the floor as well. So Caroline mentioned kind of a fall audit, and I'm not sure if you guys have a document that outlines that, but I think that is a fantastic practice for everyone to have, not just for your water lines, but just in general. Can you guys maybe just run through that one more time very quickly for everyone, like what you guys would do in the fall? I'm sure that encompasses everything from, checking to make sure there are no existing leaks through your insulation, through checking the meter bodies themselves. Is that correct?
Yes, I will go ahead and share my screen in just a second. On the fall audit portion, so we have a full rundown document, and I'll go ahead and share what that looks like. On the fall audit portion, we do have a checklist. It's very detailed, but I recommend being detailed on this front. So let's see here. All right. This is the diagram here. We've broken it down by temperature on what the ratio of heat tape to lines should be, as well as good pointers, picture of what that insulation jacket should look like around the meter, and what we recommend for insulation up here. On the fall audit portion, it's going to be that last page here, and it gives you a full in-depth checklist between software here, heat tape, insulation, skirting, meter connections. It all starts on the hardware side, so that's your first offense, like Tristan has talked about with heat tape, insulation, skirting. But more importantly, setting up alerts and water scopes, that's one of the things we do best, is we'll alert you of any issue we see. So make sure somebody is getting emailed those alerts. I know Ryan gets alerted and his team has specific alerts set up that they prefer. And so the same can be done for your property as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Caroline.
We also, I forgot to mention this part, we also have videos. So the demo that Tristan just did, we also have a video of how to replace that meter body, and additionally how to prevent freezes. So if you prefer to learn via video, these are the best. And on our website, we have videos for just about anything. Our team has been amazing with content. So we will video anything and demo anything we can there. Any other questions I can help address?
I'll hop in real quick, everybody. So on our last podcast with Metron, we got to demo a little bit about what I do behind the scenes. Now I've got however many thousands of Metron meters myself. We're all southeast, so I don't actually have to deal with the cold weather very frequently. But when I talk to folks about Metron, because I get asked all the time, what system do you use? Obviously I always recommend Metron because I use it. But typically when I hear complaints about, man, my Metron meters don't work in cold weather, so like this is stupid, I go, stop. What do you do to plan for cold weather? And so the impetus of this episode with Metron is just to show everybody you can't blame the meter. Like you have to have a plan. Just like on our last call where I went through how I have a Metron team where basically on my end we do things like reach out to folks, make sure they're attacking their own leaks and whatnot. But you have to have a plan because the difference between a Metron meter and another meter, like the other meter is still going to get attacked by the cold too. So this isn't a Metron specific complaint. Just again, the kind of impetus I wanted to attack here is like, look, if you are buying in the Midwest in cold states, you have to have a plan for this. You just do, and Metron might ping you and alert you and give you great data. And so it's a little bit quicker how conspicuous something might be amiss. Whereas another meter, like you don't know until months later, if ever, right? So I just wanted to hop in there and give that real quick. Anybody from the audience have any questions? And Mike, I know you bumped into some issues yourself with cold weather stuff, specifically around Metron. Anything that the crew hasn't addressed?
Not on my end. You guys have done a fantastic job, especially with the visual representations. Thank you so much. This is going to be so valuable for so many people. I did want to jump in here with, the obvious retort from a lot of people. There's competitors who have, I guess, sonar type meters that don't have water running through them. And there's a lot of issues with those meters. One of them being that they're not as accurate, and you're never going to get as accurate a reading as you will from actually water running through a meter, which is why, most, if not all, municipalities use inline meters to measure the water coming through. And so what you'll notice if you use a sonar meter is likely that you will have a slippage of, your recapture. potentially, right? Or you're overcharging your residents, which could be even worse potentially because it could lead to a lawsuit. So just the fidelity of these meters is the best in the business. And we haven't even in this episode touched on the quality of the actual technology, which Ryan and Caroline done such a fantastic job of demonstrating. The ease of connection with your rent manager systems or other property management systems. These are, you can't really put a number on those integrations realistically. And the reason, I won't get into, but it's effectively just the data management aspect of these meters is just unbelievable in comparison. So, I don't know if you guys want to touch upon those specific topics. I think I've heard the word sonar meter a million times in response to the meter freeze issue, but I do know even firsthand in some cases that they are not as accurate. So go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and touch on it a little bit. So, some background of Metron. We've been around for 30 years, and our half of our business is actually providing the utility meters to utilities and municipalities. And so they all have to be utility grade meters with the right certifications and therefore have to be accurate. And in our case, down to the thousandth of a gallon. And our largest clients on that end are New York City and North Las Vegas. So there's a reason that we're trusted by these large utilities, and it's because we're accurate and we have great meters and great equipment. And the data is really what sets us apart, right? Those alerts, what you see in WaterScope, integrations with partners like Rent Manager, Conservice, so on and so forth. And when you're running, you're owning and operating a mobile home park, you want to be able to tech stack as best as you can, so it's pretty hands off. Now, in most cases, you're still going to have to do a lot of work, like we said, setting up the pad itself. It's manual labor, getting the heat tape, skirting. But when it comes to the software, getting that integrated into something like Rent Manager, I highly, highly recommend. And that way your billing platform and your water and your utility platform are in sync. And then you don't have to do as much work throughout the month. Tristan, anything else you want to add, especially on the hardware side? You've been installing these meters for a very, very long time, and you've run into, I'm sure, plenty of different meter types.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the biggest complaints I hear, especially when I was on site doing installs, is, oh, that's a plastic meter. Oh, it's going to be terrible. And we wish we had the brass meters back. You would be surprised how many quarter-sized holes I've seen in the side of brass meters in cold states. They are not as resistant as you would think. It's a very rigid material. It doesn't have a lot of flex to it. That's the whole reason we have composite meters. So I think there's a little bit of a misnomer around composite meters that they're not as durable, they're not as reliable, but that is just simply a misnomer. It's not true. So I'd love to add that in, yeah.
Yeah, I will emphasize and jump on what Mike said. Accuracy is my number one priority, especially as it relates to billing for utilities. And I really want to emphasize that tenants will push back, lawsuits can happen. So making sure accuracy is accounted for when you're selecting a meter is really important. What's also important and most people miss is your recapture rate. You want to be checking your recapture rate as much as possible and tracking that, yearly, monthly, quarterly, whatever you can do. That is just money essentially going into the ground, or in some cases not being billed back to tenants when it can be. So those are two really important things that we strive to help our owners with.
Well, thank you so much, Caroline. I think that really says it all. And if you
So-
guys want, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, real quick. When you talk about a sonar meter, I think you're talking about like the clamp-on ones that just go around the outside of the pipe.
That's the one.
Yeah, and yes, just based on what I've seen and talked to people about, not only is there an issue with the overall accuracy of those, but also you got to consider, what's the material that it's trying to gauge through. one type of a meter is not going to measure the quantity of water going through a pipe that's copper versus composite versus whatever. So there's a number of things, and I'm not going to say there's not applications for those types of meters. There certainly are in certain situations, but underneath a manufactured house, that's just, to Caroline's point, that's a dangerous game you're playing with accuracy. So
To kind of piggyback off of that too, having a clamp on meter does not prevent your water line from freezing. You're still going to have to deal with cold weather. You're still going to have to make sure you're doing your due diligence.
No doubt. No doubt. This has been a rough winter, I think, for anyone in the Northeast. I think as early as November, we started experiencing freezes. I think most people uh, have incorrectly assumed that winter starts in January, and it doesn't. So make sure you guys are doing that early and thoroughly. This checklist that they've provided, and I'm sure you guys will have no issues going forward. So thank you guys so much for doing this. It was fantastic. I don't know if you guys have any parting words. I know that there will be a link sent out to everyone who wants to connect with Caroline, Tristan, and Nick after the call. And for those of you who are listening after the fact, there should be a link right under this video or this podcast for you to click and reach out to them. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys. Yeah, reach out to me. Any questions? I've seen and answered questions about just about anything as it relates to water. So I am happy to talk, analyze your water bill for you, see where there are gaps, infrastructure, anything like that. So please reach out, and to me, Tristan or Nick, we're happy to help.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate you guys having me on. This is a good conversation. I'm glad I could bring some expertise in.
I
I
just
do
want
want
to,
to see a question from Michael about installing a meter inside the home. My thought, and Ryan, jump in if you feel differently on this. When you install a meter in the home, you lose the ability to quickly access the meter in the case of servicing it. And it's a mobile home park. It's not safe from somebody taking it off the line so they don't have to get billed for water. We see it far too often. So I always recommend keeping it underneath the home. It's out of sight, out of mind from the tenants. It's protected from a lawnmower going over it. And if it's inside a mobile home, they can access it. I've lived in apartments. They lock the water heater closet so I cannot access the sub meter. So it's not my favorite idea.
I don't love it either. Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, and thank you, Michael, for that question. I don't like it either for a whole lot of reasons. First off, if you don't own the home, you have to enter someone else's personal property in order to address or fix your own personal property. It's just better outside. It's better close to or at a shutoff valve outside the home. So I just, I'm not a big fan of that, but I understand your thought process there, which is like, well, if the home's heated, then maybe we can avoid all this. Just real quick, but good question though. Good. I like where your head's at. I want to really emphasize this because I know with this episode and probably the last one where we went through my water scope is when folks maybe see how much effort I put into it and I have a team and all that stuff, it may feel intimidating, like, oh my gosh, this sounds like so much work. The reality is those videos on Metron's website are unbelievable. They're quick, they're short, they use lots of visualizations. It's easy. Obviously, you have this podcast and others. It's honestly not that much work on a daily basis. It's more work for us to send out text messages and make phone calls when residents have leaks. It's really a wonderful service when you kind of get the gist and you've put the time in. So I just wanted to really, really encourage everybody to use Metron's website and those videos. They're awesome.
I just went ahead and put the link to that in the chat if anybody is interested.
All right, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you soon. We're going to have Metron again, I'm sure, very shortly. So appreciate all three of you and Ryan for jumping on. Talk to everybody soon. Have a great rest of your week and stay warm, people.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Y'all take care.